What is up, guys? Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a simple 10-question quiz with personalized results inside Genshin Impact's Miliastra Wonderland. Just to show you what's coming up, we spawn on this map, you go to the sign, and you start the quiz. You get multiple choice questions. Based on your personality, you just choose whatever fits, kind of like a cringy BuzzFeed quiz. And then based on the answers you chose, it will calculate which Natlan tribe you belong to. And I got Children of the Echoes. And then I can exit out the stage. Let's get right into it. Before you even get into the map creation, you're going to need your questions. I'm going to have 10 questions with 3 answers to each question. Each answer will go to 2 different tribes of Natlan. You're going to want to vary these answers so that you don't get the same 2 answers per each option you choose. For example, you don't want too many answers to have both People of the Springs and Collective of the Plenty, because if you choose those options every time, there will be a tie between the 2 different answer choices. Once you're inside Genshin Impact, you're going to want to go to the Paimon menu and go to My Miliastra Wonderland. Now we're going to create our game. So once you load in, you're going to have a big empty field. We don't really need that much space since we're just doing a little quiz, so I'm actually going to go to the terrain editor, click the area 1 brush, delete, and I'm going to start deleting some of this map. Once you have the size you want, just press the X and it'll save your terrain. I'm not going to show you how to do too much decoration in here because that's more up to how you'd like to do it, but I would recommend going back into the Entity Placement menu, going to Dynamic Units, Other, Empty Model, and increasing the size of this a bit. I'm just making it big enough so that it goes along the edge of my border and covers the whole thing, and also tall enough so that if we toggle off climbable, the player cannot reach over the top. This will effectively trap the player inside the map so that they can't fall off and glitch out of the map. I'm going to Control-C, Control-V, and just kind of build a border around the entire map. So now the player will spawn on this arrow right here. We can move it to the middle if you'd like. Now we're going to test and make sure you cannot fall off. So go to the square in the corner, press Test Play, Direct Upload, and I'm going to turn off these 2 switches just because I don't need to see the whole mannequin cosmetic phase or the victory/failed screen at the end. So let's press Start Game. And we spawned in at the arrow, and as you can see, I cannot fall off the edge, but there are a couple things on the screen I do not want, namely this map indicator and this faction list on the side. I don't need those in order to play my quiz, so I'm going to get rid of those next. So I'm going to press Escape and Abandon Challenge just to get back to the editor. To get rid of those, you're going to go back to the square, do Manage UI Control Groups, and in the default layout, we're going to go to Inherent Content, Minimap, turn off Initial Visibility, go to Team Information, and turn off Initial Visibility as well. And you know what, we don't also need the HP bar at the bottom because we're not going to die, so turn off that as well. Now that we have the player locked in, there's a couple other things we're going to want to do before we start making the actual quiz. So you're going to go to the square in the corner, press Stage Settings, go to Player Count Settings, and we're going to do a fixed player count, so only 1 player can join the map at a time. Just because of the way we're coding the quiz, it will not work with more players. Another thing we can do is add some background music before we forget. There's lots of options to choose from. You can just press to loop playback depending on if they take forever to do the quiz for some reason, and then you can just save your map and it will automatically play when they join. Now for the actual quiz, we're going to have to make it so that the players can actually start the quiz. We're going to have to build the quiz questions and selection itself, and we're also going to have to make it so that the quiz calculates on the player to give them the answer at the end. Now to make the actual questions for the quiz, we're going to go back to the square, Manage UI Control Groups, go to UI Control Group Library, and we're going to add a UI control template at the bottom. The way I'm going to build the quiz is through a deck selector, so I'm going to click that, and I'm going to click down on this arrow so I can get to the actual panel editor. So what we're going to want to do here is turn off the show reset count limit because we're not going to allow them to reselect their question. It is going to be a one-time selection. We're also not really going to have a timer on these questions. They can take as long as they'd like. So I'm going to turn off show remaining times, and I'm just going to set this to like 9999 just so that it gives them plenty of time to answer the questions. You can leave this pause game in single player mode on if you'd like. It'll just make the world around them stop moving when they're in the questions, but I don't really care. I'm just going to turn it off in case I want to add like flowing water or more ambience nearby. We're also going to want to turn off that controls can collapse, so that way they cannot exit the quiz until they are finished. I'm going to turn this off as well because they're going to choose and answer whether they want to or not. Now we're going to go into the option configuration. This is just going to choose what the answers look like. Just as an example, I'm going to add a couple rows. So just generically, we have option 1 and option 2. The deck icon just lets you choose like a picture for each card. You can also change the color of the card to whatever you'd like. You can add a title if you want, a tag description. With those two generic options, this is what it's going to look like. So me personally, for my questions, I don't really want to have an icon for my questions, so I'm just going to turn that off. And I don't really use the deck title either, so I'm just going to turn that off. So this is how it's going to look basically when we have a question. Now we have to build the question itself. So my first question for my which Natland tribe are you quiz is how would you prefer to travel a long distance? So I'm going to take this question that I have pre-written. I'm going to go to page settings and change the title to that question. Now for the answer choices, I'm going to go into the deck, edit details, and I have 3 different options for this question, so I'm going to add 3 rows. And I'm going to take my 3 different answer choices I have, and I'm going to copy and paste them into each deck. And I'm going to put them into the deck description. And I'm just going to change these to whatever color I want. We may as well have, I don't know, orange, red, blue. I don't know, I think those are pretty Natland colors. So now this is how it's going to look whenever the question pops up on their screen. So how would you prefer to travel a long distance? They can choose their answer, confirm, and it'll bring up the next question. In order for this deck selector to be an option in the node graph editor later on, we're going to need to save it. So go to the deck selector that we had made, press save as template, and I'm just going to save it as question 1. And I'm going to confirm. Now we have our question 1 template saved up here. Now we just have to repeat that for the next 9 questions. To make this process a little bit easier, you can always copy and then just paste right back on there. And then on this new question 1, go to the panel, go to the page settings, and then copy and paste your second question into the title text. You can't really see it because it's like behind the first one, but if you turn the first one off, you can see that it's there. I'm going to go back to my option configuration, edit the details, and just copy and paste the answer choices I had in my Google Doc right onto the deck selector. You can change the colors again if you'd like. I'm just going to keep them the same. So now we have our question 2, which exotic pet would you like? And they'll choose that and it'll bring them to the next question. But don't forget to go to your question 1 duplicate, save it as a template, and do question 2 because you have to have something for the node graph to reference later on when we build the question selector. I'm just going to do the same thing for question 3. Right click, paste, turn this off so I can see it, go to this question, the panel, go to the page settings, copy and paste question 3, go to options, edit details, copy and paste my 3 answer choices into the deck description, and there's our question 3. I'm going to go here, save as template, and save it as question 3. And so now we have our first 3 questions done, and you're just going to repeat this for as many questions as you have. Okay, now that I've added all 10 questions into the game, I now have to have a way for the quiz to actually start when the player enters. So I'm just going to exit, make sure it's saved, just in case. And now I'm going to add an object that the player can click on to start the quiz. So it's important to note that it's going to have to be an object that you can add a node graph to, which are only dynamic units. So it'd have to be one of these objects, any of these objects, or an empty model. If you want to have something like a static unit, like, for example, I don't know, this wooden post, you want them to be able to click on it and start the quiz, you can just have it sitting on the map and then add an empty model on top of it. It can literally be anything, but I'm just going to add this road sign, and now we're going to have to add a tab for the players to click on to start the quiz. So we're going to go to this button right here, press Add Common Component, and add a tab. Then I'm going to go to Advanced Editing. I'm going to press this to change the icon, I don't know, maybe this hand, and I'm going to change the tab text to say Start Quiz. This box right here is what the players have to be standing inside for the tab to show up, and I think that's a little bit small, so I'm just going to increase the scale by like, I don't know, 4 or something. Now the tab will show up when the player is standing in this bigger radius. And you're going to want to make sure this is turned on so that the tab is turned on right when the player loads into the game. Now we're getting into the fun stuff, which is the node editor. So first, I'm going to go into this square, press this Miliastra sandbox button, and it will bring up this editor. So I'm just going to go into the uncategorized tab, right click, press new node graph, and I'm going to just rename it to Start the Quiz. Go back to the sign, go to the node graph, and make sure that the Start the Quiz node graph is mounted onto the sign. Now when we go back here, you can enter the node graph for Start the Quiz, and we're going to start building the node graph. To get started, we're going to right click and find the When the Tab is Selected event node. Just to give a quick rundown on all the node types, the execution nodes are things that will happen after an event node starts. So for example, the event is when the tab is selected and then execution will happen. The flow control nodes make it so that when certain conditions happen, you can have the execution continue basically. We'll get more into that later in some examples. The query nodes give the graph more information that it might need in order to run the execution, and the operation nodes just do math. Back to the quiz, we're going to want 2 things to happen whenever the player selects the tab. One being the actual quiz popping up, but we're also going to need the tab that they selected to disappear, that way when they exit the quiz, they can't start it over. To do that, we're going to have to disable the tab. But later on, we're going to actually be adding more tabs to the sign so that the player can get the results. So we need it to be only when the first tab that we already put on the sign is selected, that tab will disable. If we go back to the sign and go to the tab we created, we can see that the ID was 1 for that specific tab. So go back into the sandbox, and we're going to need the tab ID to equal 1. So if that equals 1, and the result, here's that double branch from earlier, and that result equals yes, then it will disable the tab so we can connect all those. A couple more things we need to add here is the tab ID that it's going to disable. So we're going to just connect that so that it's the same tab ID that we selected, and the target entity that it's going to disable the tab on is the sign itself, which is the event source. If we go back to our sandbox, we can test this out and make sure it all works. Go to Save, Test Play, Direct Upload, and Start Game. We will load in, and you can click the tab on the sign, and it will disappear. Okay, now we need the quiz to pop up whenever the player clicks the tab. So how we're going to do that is we're going to add a new node that will invoke the deck selector. And the decks are what we had put in the UI control group to have the questions pop up. So we can go ahead and connect these so that after the tab is disabled, this will automatically happen. And now for the target player, we want the deck to pop up for the player that clicked the tab. So we're going to get the selector entity, but the selector of the tab is actually the character and not the player, because the character and the player are two separate entities. So we're going to need to get the player to which the character belongs, get that entity, and it will pop up for the player of the character that clicked the tab. Now we need to have the deck question 1 pop up. To do that, we're just going to select this magnifying glass and select our question 1. For the duration, I'm just going to put 9999 just so that it doesn't really time out on the player. We'll get back to these two in a second. We want the minimum quantity, so the least amount of options they can click, to be 1. We only want them to be able to click 1 option, so I'm going to put 1 for the maximum quantity of answers as well. Refresh, I don't want them to be able to go back and retry their answers, so I'm just going to put cannot refresh. I'm going to put this 0, 0. Now for these 3, the corresponding result list and the results that will display and the default return selection. These 3 we're just going to want to connect to however many answers we gave the question. So I'm going to right click, do an assembly list, and for each of our questions we had 3 different answers, so I'm going to add 3 different options. We're going to want to click this little settings bar and change it to an integer. So we have 1, 2, 3 questions. In that list of 1, 2, and 3, we're just going to connect to all 3 of these little, I don't even know what to call them, all 3 of those. So now when the player clicks on the tab, it will disable the tab and bring up the first question. I'm going to test and make sure it works. And when I enter, I can click on this and it brings up the first question. Before we get into the next questions though, we're going to want to wait for whenever they answer the question that it sends out a signal for whichever answer they chose. So we're going to go to this Signal Explorer and we're going to add a signal. In my case, I have 6 different signals because there's 6 different tribes of Natland that they can get. So once I've created 6 different signals, I'm going to apply my changes so that it saves. And now we are ready to build the next part of the quiz, which is having the selection they chose actually track. So to do this, we're going to add another event node when the deck selection is complete. So we want it whenever the deck is complete, it's going to send a signal of whichever answer they chose and then bring up the next question. To do that, we're going to have to do a few things. So first we're going to want to make sure it's the right question. Since there's 10 questions, we don't want it to falsely send out a signal for the wrong question. So we're going to make sure that when the deck selector is complete for this first question. To do that, we're going to take the deck selector index. We're going to make sure that it equals this index right here. So I'm just going to copy and paste. So when that equals and the result is yes, so do a double branch to get that yes or no node. Then after it decides yes, it was this first question, we're going to need to get the answer the player selected and send out the signal. So there's 3 different results they could have gotten out of the deck selector. So we're going to need the selection result and get the value from the list of whichever answer they chose. So we're going to get the selection result list, the list of answers they chose, but since it's only going to be 1, it's going to get 1 value from the list. If that value that we get from the deck selector equals 1, 2, or 3, it will send out a different signal per which result it is. So I'm going to need 3 different equal nodes. I'm going to do that, copy and paste it a couple times. So we're going to take that value that we got from whatever the player selected, and if it equals 1, 2, or 3, it will give a different result. So we're going to put 1, 2, and 3 into the different options it can give us. Now we need to have it say yes or no, did it equal one of these 3 options? So we're going to take more double branches. I'm just going to copy and paste this one. So yes, if it equaled value 3, yes if it equaled value 2, and yes if it equaled value 1. And you can just take this one so that it actually flows and connects and just connect it to all 3 of these. So now we need these 3 to send out a signal based on what the player chose. In order to do that, we're going to do yes, it equaled answer 1. We're going to send a signal of whichever tribe value 1 or answer 1 went to. Answer 1 to question 1 was the Flower Feather Clan and Masters of the Nightwind. So if they choose A, we're going to want it to send out a signal for Flower Feather Clan and Masters of the Nightwind. So if they chose A, I'm going to send out Flower Feather Clan, and I'm also going to send a signal that they chose Masters of the Nightwind. I can copy these for the next 2. So for question 2, the answers were Children of the Echoes and Scions of the Canopy. And for question 3, make sure everything connects. If they chose answer 3, that corresponds to People of the Springs and Collective of the Plenty. So now we have it. When question 1 is complete, it takes the answer they chose and sends out a signal based on which tribe it corresponded to. Now that it's sent out the signal, we need it to bring up question 2. So I'm just going to take this node from up here, copy it, and paste it over here, and make sure all 3 connect back to it. So no matter what answer they choose, it will bring up question 2. One thing I am going to change though is bringing up the deck selector and making sure it's question 2. That way, when question 1 is complete, and it calculates the answer they chose, it will then bring up question 2. One last thing we have to do on each question is make sure that the target player connects back to the target player of the deck selector. That way it knows which player, even though there's only one, that it will bring up the next question for. Now we just have to do this 8 more times. 9 more times? I can do math. I'm just going to avoid rebuilding all that though. I'm going to take all these for my first question, copy, and paste. And we're going to want to change a couple things to make it add up. So we're going to want to take question 2's deck selector index, and when question 2 is completed, so we have to copy and paste it down here. So now when it knows that question 2 is complete, it will then calculate and send out to start question 3. But don't forget to change the signals for whichever answers you have. So now we have 2 different questions done. I'm just gonna keep pasting and keep on chugging through all 10 questions, making sure to choose the correct signal to send out for each answer, and making sure that the deck question index we brought up matches the question it corresponds to down here, and then changing this to be the next question, pasting it down there, changing signals, so on and so forth for all 10 questions. Okay, I now have all 10 questions coded in, but you may have noticed that for the last question, we don't have an 11th question to code in, so we can just delete these 2. And we're going to want these to actually enable a new tab when it's selected that will bring up the player's results. I'm going to go back to the sign, go back here, go to the tab, Advanced Editing, and I'm going to add a new tab. This one is going to be the hand as well, and I'm just going to say Get Results, and we're going to want this one to not be initially effective. Go back into the node graph and press Activate Tab, and connect it to all 3 of the questions, or answers, and we want tab 2 to activate on the target entity. And what entity is it going to connect to? We're going to get the sign GUID. And I'm just going to get the wooden road sign, so it will activate tab 2 on the sign once we've answered all the questions. After we've got all the questions figured out, before we test it to make sure they all pop up and such, go back here to the combat preset, go to the player, add the start the quiz node graph and the character, and also add it there just so that it actually pops up for the player. And now whenever we go to the sign and click start the quiz, it should bring up the questions. After you've selected an answer to each question, it'll bring up the next one over and over until we've gone through all the questions. And once we've answered them all, we will exit out of the quiz, and it should bring up a new tab to get our results. But now we're going to want the Get Results button to disappear when we click it, and we want it to actually give us our results, so let's work on that next. I'm going to go into the node graph sandbox, and I'm going to create a new node graph. This one will be the calculations for each answer choice to give us the result at the end. So I'm just going to put results as the name. And before we can actually fill this one out, we have to give the player character variables to calculate the answers on. Let me show you. We're going to go to the combat preset, edit player, go to this button right here, and we're going to add custom variables. And we're going to want to add integer variables. Each tribe of Natlan will have one variable, so I'm going to add 6. I'm going to name them so I don't lose track of what goes where. But each integer will start off with a variable of 0. What's going to happen whenever the player clicks on an answer choice, we're going to have the node graph add a +1 to each variable based on which answer they chose. So for example, if they chose an answer that adds a point to the collective of the plenty, it will add a +1 to this 0, therefore making the score higher than all the other tribes. This process is also a little tedious, but I will show you how to get it done. So we're going to monitor the signal for each tribe. So let's say we get the signal that the children of the echoes got a point. We are going to set the custom variable that we already set up earlier, and the variable name that we had set up for the children of the echoes, which is echoes, and we don't need it to trigger any sort of event. So how are we going to get the variable value to switch from 0 to 1? So first we're going to need what the variable on each tribe already is in order to calculate a +1. So we're going to get the player's GUID, and it's going to just be player 1 because there's only one player. We're going to get their GUID, and we're going to get our entity by GUID. Now we need to get the variable that we set on the player. It's going to be echoes. So right now we have the variable that's currently on the player in this node graph. We want this variable right there to be +1 every time we get this signal. So every time this signal happens, it will get this custom variable +1, and that will be the new custom variable in the player menu. And we also want to make sure this custom variable sets on the player entity. Now we just have to repeat for all 6 tribes. So I'm just going to copy these 4, paste them a few times, and I'm going to make sure this GUID connects to custom variable and the target entity for all 6 tribes. So target entity and target entity. Then we need to go to each signal and make sure a new tribe is selected. So this one will be for the canopy, and make sure the name matches. Canopy. It's really important to make sure that the variable name is exactly spelled how you spelled it in the custom variable on the player entity. And don't forget to change the get custom variable as well. So now we have Whenever each of the 6 nations gets their signal, it will add a +1 to the variable on the player entity, so it will raise the score of that tribe. Don't forget to go to the player entity in their node graph and add the results node to it. And now we have to make it that when they click this Get Results tab, it will bring up their answers. In order to do that, we're going to have to do a little bit more editing in the UI control group. So we're in the interface layout. I'm going to want a different UI pop-up to occur based on what their answer is. So I'm going to add 6 more layouts, 1 for each tribe. Leave the default layout and go to the first one, and I'm just going to rename these for all the tribes so I don't lose my head. So let's say they get the result that they are part of the Children of the Echoes. Add UI control, and let's use one of these templates to have a pop-up. On the pop-up, you can put whatever title you want. I'm just going to put results. And then you can put whatever you want in here to tell them what the results are. So that's the results for Children of the Echoes. Now you just go down each item in the list and tell the player which result they got. So once again, I'm going to go to Signs of the Canopy, add a UI control, template, pop-up, add a title saying you got your results, and you can tell them which tribe they got for each UI interface layout. Now we have all 6 layouts for whichever tribe they got. I'm going to close this and go back into the sandbox. And now we have to tell the program to actually give the pop-up for whichever result or variable has the highest number. First, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say when the tab is selected. And this time it's going to be tab 2. So make sure the tab ID equals tab 2. And when this is true, we're going to have it connect up to bring up a UI template. But first, we're going to have to do some big brain calculations. Go back to these 2 nodes we had over here, and you can copy and paste them because we need the player variables to calculate which UI element will pop up. So take these 2, the player GUID and the player entity, and we're going to get the custom variable for each of the 6 variables. And make sure to type in each of the variable names you had put. So we have the player ID, and now we have all the variables on the player. It's now going to grab all those variables, but we need it to figure out which of these is the biggest. So we're going to take the larger value and just connect it to these 2. So first it's going to take the echoes and canopy variables, see which one is larger. Copy and paste it, and now it's going to calculate which of these 2 is larger and which of these 2 is larger. So now we only have 3 numbers instead of 6 because it took 3 of the larger values. So now we have to get which of these is larger and which of these is larger. Since there's only, 3 variables, I'm going to get the larger of these 2 and then the larger of this one and the larger of these 2. And take the larger value. So now we have the absolute biggest value out of all the variables on the player. So what do we do with this information? We see which of these variables is equal to this largest value. So we're going to go equal, and we need 6 of these since there's 6 different options it could be. Take the largest value and see if it equals each of the tribes. So take the equal, make sure each answer equals one of these. So when the tab is selected, we want it to bring up the UI interface of whichever of these statements is true. So take the double branch, copy and paste it 6 times. If this result is true, it will do something. If these results are true, it'll do something different. You get the idea. Make sure this yes over here is connected to each of these other double branches. Now we want the UI to pop up for each of the tribes based on which answer has the largest value. It's going to switch the current interface layout for the target player, which is actually the tab that was selected down here. But we'll get into that in a second. I'm going to copy and paste this 6 times. Make sure each yes is connected to a box. And we want the selector to be the player to which the character belongs because the variables are on the player, not the characters. So get the player and get the affiliated player entity and connect that to all 6 of the target players. And for each of the tribes, change the UI layout to whichever one matches. So now based on which one is the largest, it will switch the interface layout and bring the pop-up that we made earlier over. We're going to need the sign to also have the results node on it since, the tab is on there. I was testing it and I realized I messed up. I accidentally connected this no. They all need to be on the yes node. So now, if I save, make sure that results node graph is connected to both the sign and the player. Test play. I start the quiz. I should get my results. And I got assigned to the people of the Springs. Now you'll notice I need to get rid of this Get Results tab after we click it, so that's one of the last steps. And we also need to add a tab that will exit us out of the game when you're done. Another thing you may have noticed is that when I got my results, I actually accidentally reactivated the HP bar, the team information, and the map. So we're going to go back into the UI elements and turn those off for each of the answer choices. So go back to Manage UI Control Groups, go to the echoes, and turn off the mini-map, team information, and HP bar. And I'm going to do that for all 6 tribes. Okay, now that those are all turned off, let's go back into the sandbox, and let's add a new node graph, rename it, End of Quiz, make sure it's on the sign, and just in case, let's make sure it's also on the player and the character. We're going to add 2 things. We're going to make it so that tab for the results gets disabled when we select it, and we're going to add a new tab that will close out the stage. So first, when the tab is selected, if the tab ID equals tab number 2, and if that is true, then we will disable tab 2 for the sign. Just drag the tab ID over there. We'll disable that. But we also want to enable tab 3, which will be to close out the game. Go back to the sign, advanced editing, add a new tab. We're going to make this one a door, and name it exit stage, and turn off initially effective. And as you can see, this ID is 3. Go back into the sandbox and copy and paste this node. We want it to be on the same entity, connect it so that it actually happens, and we're going to enable tab 3, make sure it is enabling. And last step, when the tab is selected, if the tab ID equals tab 3, and this is true, then we will set the player's settlement status, and we're going to want them to have won the stage. You can also just have it be TBC, which basically means they completed the stage, but not necessarily won. So actually, I'm going to leave it like that. And get the selector entity, get the player to which the character belongs, because we're setting the player settlement status. And then when all this is over, we can settle the stage. Now we can test it out, and I'm actually going to turn these 2 back on for dramatic effect. Get my results. I got Children of the Echoes that time. Press X, and it should allow me to exit the stage. Now that we know our game works and it is ready to be published, you can go here, press Upload Stage, upload a new stage, and it will submit your stage for review. Over here, you can press the edit icon, and you can title your stage whatever you'd like as long as it's not taken already. You can upload whatever cover you want. Be sure to enter a description. Be sure to add some tags. So for this one, you're going to want to leave casual enjoyment because you're not really here for a long time. This works on all devices. I hope they add some more options to the gameplay types here, but I'm just going to put like action adventure because it's the default one. It's third person, casual, submit, and then once they're both approved, you can press post, and then it'll bring up which information you'd like to post, and then you press confirm and it will upload. If you have any questions, just let me know, and I hope you have some fun creating your own quizzes. And if you use this tutorial to make any quizzes, definitely let me try them out. Alright, see y'all later.